Okay, so good afternoon, distinguished speakers and delegates and guests. I'm Carmine Di Noia, I'm the Director for Financial Enterprise Affairs at the OECD. Welcome to this OECD Roundtable on Corporate Sustainability Practices. And this first part of the Roundtable is being live streamed. And this is a special occasion for two reasons. First, we are bringing together for the first time the delegates from three prominent bodies that my directorate serves as secretariat, so the Corporate Governance Committee, the Working Party on state ownership and privatization practices, and the Working Party on responsible business conduct. And I have my right the three chairs. And second, this roundtable acts as the launch event of the second edition of our the OECD Global Corporate Sustainability Report. So the report sets out a comprehensive and robust analysis of listed companies' sustainability practices, and we like to do evidence-based work. And, you know, corporate sustainability, related disclosure, and is not, you know, an end in itself, but it's like corporate governance more broadly. But it means to the end of having companies more efficient and resilient, in order also to have, you know, more to navigate actually in these more increasingly geopolitical tensions and navigating these uncharted territories. But why? To have more sustainable economies to create economic growth. And this is also the better policies for better life motto at the OECD. And so we will discuss today corporate sustainability disclosures. We always say one size does not fit all, but I have to say the opposite. This is not one size, but fit for all. And so now our Secretary General couldn't join the roundtable, but he has recorded a short message to officially launch the Global Corporate Sustainability Report. He's actually flying in this moment. And so I would like to ask my colleagues to play it now, please.
Dear chairs, Jean-Paul Servet, Christine Kaufmann and Maja Strandberg, colleagues, friends all. A very warm welcome to this launch of the OECD's 2025 Global Corporate Sustainability Report. Our flagship report monitoring the uptake of corporate sustainability practices relative to the OECD's key standards in this area. The G20 OECD Principles of Corporate Governance, the Guidelines on Corporate Governance of State-Owned Enterprises, and the Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises on Responsible Business Conduct. Good corporate governance provides the foundation for investor confidence and for well-functioning markets. It safeguards stakeholders' interests, it encourages efficiency, and it strengthens the long-term resilience and value of businesses by providing direction and oversight of business management. Good corporate governance can also be a driver and an enabler of corporate sustainability. This 2025 edition of the Global Corporate Sustainability Report shows that a growing share of companies have adopted corporate sustainability practices. This is a reflection of evolving expectations on the part of investors, as well as a recognition by companies that, for example, climate-related risks can have a material impact on business performance. In 2024, nearly 13,000 listed companies, representing 91% of total global market capitalization, disclosed sustainability-related information, which was up from 9,600 listed companies, representing 86% of global market capitalization some 2 years earlier. Companies representing 70% of global market capitalization also had a board-level committee directly overseeing sustainability risks in 2024, which was up from 56% 2 years earlier. And among listed companies with variable executive compensation, the share that linked this compensation to sustainability factors has also increased from 60% in 22 60% of global market capitalization, I should say, in 2022 to 67% last year. Governments and companies can build on this positive momentum in the right direction to help facilitate the market-driven uptake of sustainability practices by firstly continuing to promote the disclosure of sustainability information across industries and regions, and by broadening the scope of disclosed data. The share of companies disclosing sustainability information varies greatly across industries and across regions, limiting the ability of investors to compare sustainability performance and make well-informed decisions. The energy sector leads in terms of sustainability disclosures, with companies representing 94% of global market capitalization in that sector making sustainability information public. By comparison, in the real estate sector, this information is released by companies representing only 78% of global sector market capitalization. There are also significant variations between regions. In the United States, companies representing 86% of market capitalization disclose this information compared to just 50% of regional market capitalization in the Middle East and North Africa. There is also room to broaden the scope of disclosed data. Our analysis shows that in 2024, companies representing 88% of global market capitalization disclosed Scope 1 carbon emissions, emissions from sources that the company owns or controls directly, and Scope 2 emissions from the company's energy use. However, companies representing only 76% of global market capitalization disclosed so-called Scope 3 emissions, those generated by the company up and down its value chain, which are significantly greater than Scope 1 and 2 emissions. For instance, Scope 3 emissions represent 74% of the emissions by listed energy companies, to put it into context. Promoting the disclosure of more comprehensive carbon emissions data will allow investors to make accurate comparisons among companies and to assess the full impact of their operations. Second, promoting the interoperability of sustainability accounting standards and frameworks. Companies of different sizes across different regions and sectors use diverse standards for the disclosure of sustainability-related information, making it more difficult for investors to compare sustainability performance when these standards are not closely aligned. Reporting under multiple different standards can also result in significant additional burdens on companies. The report shows that the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI standards, are used by companies representing 61% of global market capitalization, compared to 56% for the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, 46% for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures recommendations, and 4% for the IFRS S1 and S2 standards. While companies representing 65% of market capitalization in Europe are subject to the use of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. International cooperation to further promote improved interoperability of all these reporting standards can help reduce costs and facilitate regulatory compliance while supporting investors. Third, making greater use of external assurance for sustainability-related disclosures. External assurance of sustainability reporting can strengthen investor confidence in the accuracy, reliability, and consistency of a company's sustainability reporting. Already, companies representing 81% of global market capitalization have engaged third-party assurance providers for their sustainability-related disclosures, including companies operating in markets where such verification is not legally required. Governments and self-regulatory institutions can consider further encouraging external assurance of sustainability-related disclosures to reassure investors and protect their interests, for instance through voluntary corporate governance codes. Fourth, enhancing transparency regarding companies' lobbying activities to ensure they align with companies' stated sustainability objectives. According to our data on the energy sector, currently 7% of listed companies in the sector across the world publicly disclose their stance on climate, public policy and regulation, and 15% report their business association memberships. Greater disclosure of lobbying activities enables sustainability-focused investors to evaluate how closely a company's policy positions align with its sustainability objectives, and to decide whether to use their voting rights to influence its practices accordingly. In conclusion, as investor appetite continues to drive the adoption of corporate sustainability practices across the world, ensuring high-quality sustainability information and comparability across companies will be essential in allowing investors to make well-informed decisions and effectively guide businesses towards achieving meaningful sustainability outcomes. The OECD will continue to monitor the uptake of sustainability practices, provide analysis to further promote the adoption of sound corporate governance standards, and ultimately support the efficient functioning of markets to help unlock new investment in strong, sustainable economic growth. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to our Secretary General, and so it's now my pleasure to invite the Chair of the Corporate Governance Committee, Jean-Paul Servet, to present the key findings of the report in more detail. So Jean-Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Carmine. Good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, because I see also many colleagues from the community of financial supervisors, it's a real pleasure for me to present today the second edition of the OECD Global Corporate Sustainability Report. And I think that I may say, Carmine, that it's again a real success. 250 person in this room, which is very crowded, but also outside the room through screen, which means at the end of the day, more than 1,000 people, I would say, able to listen to us, to interact, I presume also via chat and so on with us. So for this, allow me to congratulate you, Serdar, Caio, and all the members of your team who are very, very motivated. And I think that at least once in my life, I'm objective because I'm not on the payroll of the OECD. So I don't have any conflict of interest for that. So it's a real pleasure for me to be with you, ladies and gentlemen, in order to present the key trends and market practices related to corporate sustainability. I will also expose some key policy insight. Key policy, I would say, what does it mean? So I will say some comment about the framework, and also could be useful in order to support policymakers, standard setter, and others in further aligning market practices with the well-known OECD G20, OECD Principle of Corporate Governance, and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprise and responsible business conduct, and I will do that, of course, with my dear colleagues. I would say the best way to open the discussion is just to remind, it's a kind, dear Carmine, and thanks also for the comment provided by Matthias Cormo, the Secretary General of OECD. I think that it's not exaggerated to say that OECD, it means extraordinary capacity to extract data, generally speaking. As you know, I would say to have the possibility from time to time to have a look on OECD website means, I would say, more or less the sky is the limit about the quality and the quantity of data. And ladies and gentlemen, indeed, this new report is again an outstanding database, more than 100 pages, I would say, including the appendix, in order to explain, I would say, what's the situation about sustainable finance. In my country, there are three official languages: German, because Matthias Corman used to be a Belgian citizen and German speaking, French and Dutch. And in Dutch, we are used to say, meten is weten. So it means to measure is to know. And I think it's always important, especially when we discuss about corporate governance, and also about, I would say, sustainable finance, which are not by definition easy subject to deal with because there are some sensitivities such at a particular level. I think it's always important to have the capacity to use data for that. And that's exactly one of the added value OECD. Of course, the OECD is not the only one data provider, I would say, at international level, but for sure one of the best. And that is precisely the added value of the second report. The fact also that we are coming back regularly, it means also that we have the capacity to see the evolution, and that's exactly as you already stressed, and Matthias Kaumann as well, to see where we are, I would say 3 years after the first, I would say, statistic that we were able to publish, and to see how to strengthen the sustainability and resilience of company. Frankly speaking, also from a pedagogical point of view, I have the pleasure also to give lecture the Saturday University of Brussels. It's always important to explain that in plain English, and that this is the case, I would say, with this report, in order to provide for accessible information to help policymakers, regulator, listed company, preparers, investor, student, media, and how to be able to understand sustainability-related practices and how they are evolving. The report is not a surprise, ladies and gentlemen, also provides policy insight for consideration based on the G20 OECD principle of corporate governance and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. It displays also the latest data, yes, 2024, the cutoff is 2024, and trends on the disclosure of corporate sustainability information, and a deep dive chapter into disclosure practice. And of course, it's not a surprise, of energy companies. 20% of the report, more or less 20 pages, are about, I would say, many statistics about the energy sector. Let us start with some I would say, figures, I would say, about market practices. First of all, where do we come from and what's the evolution? And therefore, this slide is very useful because you see the difference between 2022 and 2024. It's also a very useful, I would say, slide because you see that, I would say, the evolution is not the same when you speak about market cap and about the number of companies. What do I mean by that? It means that over the past 2 years, sustainability-related disclosure has expanded further, rising from 86%, which was maybe not expected already 2 years ago, of global market capitalization in 2022 to 90% last year in 2024. And this reflects, in an objective way, I think, continued demand for such information from investors, knowing that even in 2024, there was no binding regulation as such, most of the time at jurisdictional level. However, that's important, the share by number of companies remains much more moderate, which suggests that smaller companies may still face disproportionate disclosure. And that's exactly what I am saying for so many years. If you want to be successful, only material information for investors who would like to understand what they have to know in order to decide about an investment or not. It must be proportionate. It must be a step-by-step approach, and it means, I would say, that the objective, of course, is focused for the time being on, I would say, important listed company. What does it mean? It means that in the figure, the value displays of the bar reflect the percentage point changes in disclosure rate in relation to 2020. Sector-wise, and as I stressed some minutes ago, disclosure level, of course, vary very significantly, and of course, energy company have the highest rate of disclosure, covering 94% of the industry market capitalization. The real estate sector has the lowest share at 78%. What about the use of different so-called accounting standards relating to financial information related to sustainable finance? I think it's fair to say that the world is changing. when I gave my first speech some years ago about sustainable finance, the question, the comment of the pushback from many people doing will say, well, the problem we have, it's a kind of, I would say, very fragmented landscape, alphabet soup, which was quite surprising. Most of the time, it was not about an alphabet soup of binding regulation, but about excellent self-regulated initiative. No, the world is changing, I have to say, even if it's not as such reflected in the 2024. And it means that some years ago, the global landscape was about GRI standards, SASB standards, excellent industrial standards about information related to some sector, TCFD recommendation, and they are still by far the most commonly used standards. But let us be clear, the world is changing with, of course, the arrival of ISSB standards, and I presume that Massa will come back on this, and also at European level with the ESRS. But the call for action, as endorsed by the IOSCO, it was decided in our Bangkok annual meeting in 2023. A call for action means that I don't have any political legitimacy. By the way, generally speaking, no political legitimacy as far as I'm concerned at national level, at European level, at international level. That will be the legitimacy at political level is by definition at national level, and to some extent for some aspect in the EU at the European level with the 3 co-legislators that you know. But it means that all call for action is just to say to the jurisdiction, look, if you think that it could be useful, or call for action means that you could apply, require, or be informed by these standards. But again, it's not a requirement. And if you are not interested, you don't do. And that's about democracy and legitimacy at national levels of all government. When I see where we are at IOSCO level 2 years after, it means 66 jurisdictions. So it means that these statistics are what they are, because of course, I would say more and more jurisdictions, 66, in fact, on all continents, are now moving to standard. But that's the choice, that's the legitimacy at a national level. Second aspect, which is for me very important, because financial market, I don't have to tell you, it's about trust. If the trust is not there, there is no future, no resilience. And of course, to have the capacity to accept to be challenged by external auditors, what we call, generally speaking, Asians, is very important. Good news, ladies and gentlemen, Asians is widespread, even without regulatory requirement. And I think it's important to stress because, by definition, a third-party Asians conducted by an independent, competent, and qualified service provider, not necessarily the external, classical, traditional auditor for financial statement, it enhances the investor confidence and their ability to compare sustainability-related information. What does it mean in 2024? It means that companies representing 81% of market capitalization among the disclosure system, disclosing sustainability-related information, obtained Asians of this information by an external service provider. And Latin America and Europe show the biggest shares of sustainability Asians. Not a surprise for you, because there is some kind of binding regulation with an update of the 8 directive relating to the supervision of audit provider. Most companies, 56%, rely, not a surprise as well, on limited Asians, providing moderate confidence based on fewer checks, that's what we call the limited Asians, while 17% use reasonable assets, which involve more extensive testing and verification. One comment, if I may, also about institutional investor. Why do we, I would say, devote so many pages about institutional investor? Because you would expect that by definition, institutional investors are the most demanding investor, maybe more than John and Mary in the street, but that's a personal view, because we are speaking about asset manager and so. And I think that taking into account this second additional report, it's fair to say that institutional investors equally invest in green and high emittent firms. What does it mean? It means that while the adoption of existing green technology by high-emitting companies is essential for the transition to a low-carbon economy, the development of new technology will also be necessary for a successful transition. Institutional investors hold, not a surprise, 37% stake in the 100 listed company with the largest number of green patents, almost the same as their 36% share in the 100% highest emitter, which is something that you can also see in some statistic about the choice of different kind of usage of funds. I would say the proportion between green funds and business as usual funds doesn't change a lot the last years. And although the public sector holds 80% of equity in the 100 highest emitting company, it holds only 4% in the 100 leading green patent file. What about the board? Tone at the top. Okay. Are they interested? Are they involved? Do they take the responsibility when we speak about sustainable finance? I think, again, in a nutshell, that's the title of the slide, boards increasingly recognize sustainability as a strategic issue. Of course, as member of the board of directors, they challenge, I would say, the quality of the information provided by the management, just because they have to, of course, to perform an oversight of the management. But globally, I would say maybe more interesting, companies representing 70% of the global market capitalization indicated their boards of directors oversee climate-related issues with higher shares in emerging Asia, excluding China, Europe, and the United States. And to fulfill this key function, the key function in assessing the company risk profile and guiding the governance practices, board can also take into consideration sustainability matters when establishing the compensation of key executives. And it means that 2/3 of companies by market capitalization that have variable executive compensation link it to sustainability-related factors. And now, if I may, I focus about the well-known Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, with a focus about energy company. Of course, why the energy sector? Not a surprise, just because the energy sector is both a pivotal driver of clean energy deployment and the single largest source of greenhouse gas emission, accounting for almost 1/3 of total emission disclosed by listed companies all around the world. Disclosure of Scope 1 and 2 emission is relatively high in the energy sector, covering 90% of the market capitalization. But again, please don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all approach. There is a lot of difference, and it's normal. I come from a country with 400,000 companies filing their account. 95% of them are real SMEs. It's normal that you have such a difference. It wouldn't be manageable by many SMEs. However, Scope 3 disclosure remains limited at 55% of market capitalization, with lower shares in emerging Asia and the Middle East and Africa. Another slide, if I may, about energy sector. And I think the added value of this slide, which is not the most easy to understand, it's an excellent slide. But I would say, as we know, the challenge for the energy sector lies in the capacity and willingness of energy companies to sustain capital expenditure necessary for the energy transition, given competing priority. What does it mean? It means, ladies and gentlemen, that between 2015 and 2024, the net cash inflow of listed energy companies from operating activities increased by 32%, enabling them to triple dividend payment and share repurchase, while net cash use in investing activities grew by less than 5%. That's the kind of slide that you like to explain. Huh? It's typical from OECD. And then I would say, last but not least, and that will be my conclusion, some so-called key policy inside. But let us be clear, there is no proposal for new policy, just to see how we can make a link between, I would say, the framework. And that's the objective of these two slides, in order to delve into the insight to support policymakers, standard setters, and other institutions in implementing the recommendation of the G20 OECD principle, generally speaking. First, about, I would say, what it means for sustainability-related disclosure. As I told you some minutes ago, of course, the world is changing, especially about the use of different frameworks. So we have clearly recent development, meaning that the global disclosure landscape is expected to converge around, if I may say, 3 standards: ISSB standards at EU level for the 20 member states of the EU ESRS, and GRI. So it means that fostering interoperability among frameworks can, of course, contribute to reducing compliance costs. The best way to avoid greenwashing is to avoid to speak and to use different vocabulary, for sure, I would say. And I would say also about the cost, because the objective is that it must be by definition manageable. And the starting point for me personally, every time say, do we have material information which can be useful for investors, I would say, and how to enhance the comparability, reliability, and decision usefulness of sustainability-related information. Third-party agents, second important point. Given that climate change is a financially material risk for many listed companies, and that scope 1 and 2 emissions are relatively straightforward to measure, to some extent, and already widely disclosed, policymakers may wish to consider how reasonable agents for companies that disclose scope 1 and scope 2 emission can be further encouraged to discuss, I would say, there are pros and cons. Board of Directors, as we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, an increasing number of companies report that their board of directors oversees climate-related issues. This is a notable development. Is it normal? Not sure, because I remember when I start my journey about sustainable finance, the involvement of many members of board of directors was not so impressive, I would say. They had their own learning. It's changing, and it's important. I would say that also, I would say the first line of defense about the quality of information is now changing and trying to improve their knowledge about this aspect. And it underscored the growing recognition by board of climate change as a financial and strategic issue. Investor landscape. The public sector is a significant shareholder in high-emitting companies in many emerging markets. Notably, most top 100 emitting companies in this region are state-owned, highlighting the role that they can play in leading by example. And I presume that you will come back on this, on sustainability and shaping outcomes for a low-carbon transition in emerging economies. As institutional investor, a portfolio allocation do not differentiate between high-emitting companies and firms investing in new green technology. Shareholder engagement initiatives targeting high emitters could be complemented by initiatives that also consider investment allocation and stewardship efforts towards highly innovative companies. Some comment about the energy sector. Rising dividend and share buyback significantly outpacing investment growth raise concern of two natures. One argument is that boards and executives may not have the right incentive to adopt, if necessary, a long-term strategy that privileges the significant investment needed for the energy transition. An equally plausible explanation to see is a shortage of bankable projects. That's what I think. I would say, in many aspects, the same for investment, limiting company ability to scale investment in line with rising operating cash flow. And of course, I am looking forward to hearing your views about these two arguments during our roundtable discussion. Also, if I may, I would say some comment about human capital. What does it mean? It means that companies representing more than 2/3 of the global market capitalization are considered to face financially material information. We are not speaking about micromanagement, that's inside the company, about material human capital risk, publicly available information. This is the same share of company considered to be facing climate change as a financially material risk. This argument invites, I think that we can say that, investors to pay closer attention to widely disclosed related metrics such as employee turnover instead of keeping, I would say, a focus on climate-centric focus. That is for, I would say, some so-called high-level comment, but please take the time to read the second edition. It must be, I would say a kind of Pavlov reflex not every year, but every 2 years? Every year?
Every 2. Yeah,
will depend. Okay, it depends.
Now we did 1.5 years.
Okay. It's a good Belgium compromise. Yes. Not 1 year, 2 years, 1 year. Okay. So, but allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to thank you, I would say, for your attention. I think that it's fair to say that the analysis and insight that I've just presented highlight some of the most important trends we are observing in corporate sustainability. And this result are, of course, expanded in the 2025 Global Corporate Sustainability Report that everybody knows, which delves, of course, deeper, 100 pages, into sectoral finding, regional trends, and policy implication. And I warmly encourage you to explore the full report, which is available now for more than 30 minutes. And it's now my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to open the floor for remarks from our distinguished colleagues. First, I am honored to invite Christine Kaufmann as in her capacity of chair of the OECD Working Party on Responsible Business Conduct to deliver a remark. And thank you very much for your perspective. And then I presume that we will have the pleasure to listen to the comment after Christine's intervention, the comment to be made by Maya Strandberg, the chair of the OECD Working Party on State Ownership and Privatization Practices, to share also her reflection. But of course, Christine, the floor is yours. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Jean-Paul, for this introduction. It's really amazing to see the room so packed and so many people following online. And I'm saying this because when I left in Zurich, Switzerland, and told my colleagues I'm going to join this roundtable for launching the report, the reaction was not exactly what I had hoped for. It was, oh. So I assume they were thinking about yet another number crunching report, yet another piece of paper. But I have to tell you, I'm really excited to be here. And why is that? Because you heard it, this report is the result of a collaborative effort, and I'm tempted to emphasize effort, because it was not an easy walk in the park to get to this result. But you really see, for a reason, 3 happy chairs on this podium joined, and I think that makes the site even more unique, by a happy director of staff. And we managed to produce a report that brings together the expertise of 3 different communities. 3 communities that would, in normal life, outside of the OECD, not necessarily be in such close contact and exchange with each other. So it's corporate governance, it's responsible business conduct, and state-owned enterprise. And what really makes this report so unique, based on this cooperation, is what I would say coherent standards, its data-based policy recommendation, and its practical relevance. I was getting a bit nervous when you showed that graph.
Not because of me.
No, because of the graph, of course. But I'm a lawyer, you know, and if there is, if numbers and graphs exceed a certain amount, it makes me nervous. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, where is this going? But I'm glad we landed on the same page.
Thank you.
So let me start with the framework. The policy considerations that Jean-Paul summarized and that are outlined in the report, they draw on 2 internationally recognized and government-backed standards. It's great to have data, and we can have, the sky is open, as much data as we want in the OECD, but we need to link it back to standards. Otherwise, it's not very helpful. And we have the G20 OECD Principles of Corporate Governance and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. Now, the beauty of these two instruments is they complement each other, and both have been updated in 2023. So they're really up to speed when it comes to the current issues. And we made sure that they are coherent. So we were going back and forth and literally going across the hallway to see where are our colleagues from corporate governance in their revision. Are they taking the wrong turn? They never did, of course, but are we still staying aligned? So this is really, really important. And what is also important, so it's coherent, it's international, it's government-backed, it's practical, because both instruments recognize that there is a need to adapt to local context. So it's not the one-size-fits-all approach. And that really is a major strength. And also the interoperability that was mentioned by you, Jean-Paul, also by the Secretary General, the alignment is a major strength. And we just had the inclusive due diligence platform over the last 2 days, and it came up again and again by business. This is what we need. We need an answer to the fragmented landscape when it comes to reporting standards. We had one company that has to comply with 7 different national legislation, applying 10 different reporting frameworks, and they're just spending about half of their time reporting. And this cannot be the goal that we are aiming for. So this is really critical, and I'm very pleased to say that we can really learn from the OECD exercise in this regard. And if we look at the reality, we see that we had 87% of companies disclosing sustainability information, telling us we have to use multiple standards and frameworks at the same time. And yes, they're all going sort of in the same direction, but with slightly different approaches. And that leads to unnecessary use of resources. It also leads over time to a certain reporting fatigue. I think we all know the feeling. If you have to fill in the same information again and again in a slightly different framework, it doesn't add to your motivation. And that leads me to my second point. So we have the standards, identifying where policy action is most needed. I was also a bit worried that we would have another report with a lot of data, but leaving me as a poor lawyer's brain a bit at a loss. I always have to question, okay, now, what are we doing with this information? Where is this getting us? And this is really important. And we see in the report indications where policy action is most needed. And what's really important for the policymakers, it's based on data, on sound data, key strengths of this organization. And that is a selling argument, as every policymaker will tell you, as every board member will tell you, give me the data and I can convince my colleagues. And again, having recommendations that are anchored in reality, not at the meta level up there somewhere, but based in business operations, based in daily practices, also by governments. And we see in the report really interesting insights, sometimes also surprising insights, a bit with a negative connotation. I'm thinking of the data and reporting on human rights impacts and management. It remains very limited across companies. So first I thought, what's going on here? Are we doing something wrong? We have little information on human rights, but quite a bit on greenhouse gas emissions. And then the report digs deeper. It provides some explanation. It doesn't tell you, well, everything is fine, but it gives you explanation. For example, that there's a correlation between company size and disclosure. Again, something we heard already from Jean-Paul. It also gives you a lot of ideas on what companies consider financially material. Climate change seems to be on the rise on corporate horizon regarding financial materiality, but for human rights, it's quite low. And we may ask ourselves, what is the reason? There seems to be a contrast between public perception, also human rights impacts on society, and corporate perception on the financial risks of these impacts. And the third interesting element, we really see legislation is driving disclosure when it comes to human rights. And that's also something you, Jean-Paul, mentioned. And of course, that gives us food for thought. What about the voluntary standards? How can we encourage disclosure without imposing legislation? And since I'm in my other life, to the extent that it exists, I should say, I'm also a professor at the university. I'm always interested in what can we learn for the future, and do we have questions that we need to think more about? And one of these questions is really the relationship between material impacts and material financial risks. And we're always mentioning that, but for me, it's really one of the first reports that gives me some food where I can work on further. So we see that, just to come up with a few numbers, we have a large percentage of companies, 86%, that identify material impacts related to biodiversity and ecosystems, but only 36% report that these impacts are financially relevant. And that makes you think, why is that? So we have different perceptions. Could be that, there's a lack of incentives, maybe. Could be that we need more information about this relationship. We really need to look into that further. And I don't want to go on for much longer, although I could and I would love to, but we all know, I think this is a very challenging time for international policy cooperation on corporate sustainability. It's not an easy topic these days. And nevertheless, we saw that also on one of the graphs that I actually understood. There is an increase in companies providing disclosure. We're up to 91% now. That is a lot. So the corporate sector is moving, despite all the difficulties that we have in the current environment. But we also see that business does need support from policymakers, from organizations like the OECD, in addressing the fragmentation. We're not going to continue on that upwards trend, I think, if we do not address these difficulties. Now, the work taking place here at the OECD really gives me confidence that we will get there. We saw that, and I can ask the question, tell me the one international organization that manages to bring together 150 policymakers from 61 countries, together with business and stakeholders in one room for 2 days, really addressing the very practical challenges of how to make due diligence work in practice, including disclosure. We just had that over the last 2 days. It was intense, it was controversial, but we really had some significant outcomes. So I think for me, it's a clear-cut case. The OECD will continue to champion this agenda also next year. And next year, we will have a very good occasion to further champion this work. We will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. And I think that's another window of opportunity to continue the discussion. So hopefully you have realized this report really is a must read. I'm not saying it's an entry ticket for the cocktail later today, but it's a really important piece of work that should give us confidence also to address the current challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmine. Good afternoon also from my part. And I would like to first thank my fellow happy chairs. That's a kind of a nice expression, Jean-Paul and Christine, for your inspiring comments. I will focus my remarks on the public sector and the state-owned enterprises that I call SOEs later on. Given their economic importance and public accountability, SOEs are uniquely positioned to lead by example in disclosing sustainability-related information. By strengthening disclosure practices, and aligning governance structures with long-term sustainability objectives, SOEs may set standards for private sector peers. I think this is what we see in all of our home countries. The leadership in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting low carbon innovation may be decisive to support a just transition to net zero. In 2024, SOEs representing 95% of the market capitalization of all listed SOEs disclosed sustainability-related information. That's a lot. Slightly higher than other companies with 91% by market capitalization. The report also examines innovation and investment among listed companies. The public sector retains close to 1/5 of the shares in the 100 companies with the largest disclosed emissions, but the public sector is less prominent on the innovation front. The public sector holds only 4% of the equity in the 100 listed companies with the highest number of green patents. This difference between the public sector's emissions footprint and its contribution to low carbon technological development highlights a structural gap. We should discuss how the public sector could strengthen its efforts in supporting innovation in low carbon technologies. The OEC's recent state-owned enterprises and sustainability leading by example report, which I'm holding here up, offers useful guidance in this regard. Governments acting as owners are urged to embed sustainability in their ownership policies, articulate clear and ambitious expectations, monitor performance, and publicly report outcomes. In conclusion, the Global Corporate Sustainability Report's insights confirm that the public sector holds a unique opportunity to lead the sustainability transition. High levels of disclosure by SOEs are a solid foundation, but they must be coupled with ambitious investments in innovation, strong governance frameworks, and coherent alignment with national and international climate and social objectives. Thank you for participating today, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel.
Thank you very much, Maya, Christine, and Jean-Paul, for your remarks, for your presentation. So we will now stop the live streaming of the roundtable, and so all discussions from now on also will follow the Chatham House rule. So we are slightly late, but having a session with